The afternoon sun outside the Cebu City Coliseum was blazing, but inside the arena the air felt cool and heavy, like everyone was waiting for something they didn't understand yet. The crowd was restless, whispering, laughing, shifting in their seats. Stage lights flickered and cameras rolled as the host announced the next performer. From the side entrance walked a thin boy, around 16, carrying an old wooden guitar that looked older than he was. His clothes were plain, almost worn out, a faded shirt with threads fraying at the collar, and shoes that looked as though they had walked very long distances. The audience noticed. A few chuckles slipped out, quiet but sharp. Some people leaned to their friends and whispered, wondering if he was lost or if he truly belonged on that stage. But the boy kept walking, even if each step seemed careful, like he didn't want to disturb the ground he was walking on. His name was Aidan O'Reilly, a boy who had traveled all the way from a small fishing village in Ireland. Word had spread backstage that his parents had passed away one harsh winter, taken by fever and cold when Aidan was still too young to understand why life can take so much away without warning. With no family left and no money to depend on, he had played on docks, street corners, and ferry ports, earning coins from strangers just to eat and keep moving. Somehow, piece by piece, he gathered just enough to find a way to the Philippines. The Cebu City Grand Talent Fest was his last chance, at least, that's what he whispered to another contestant earlier that day. The judges watched him carefully. Judge Nina leaned forward, her eyes softening with quiet concern. Judge Ramon sat still, unreadable, as though he wasn't sure whether this performance would be worth his attention. Judge Liza exhaled slowly, almost tired, perhaps expecting another shy child swallowed by nerves. But there was something about Aidan's presence, small, yes, but steady. He was trembling, but not the kind that comes from fear. It was a trembling that comes from carrying too much memory in one heart. Aidan stepped up to the microphone. The Coliseum settled. His fingers, though thin, held the guitar gently but firmly, like it was the only thing in the world that had ever stayed with him. He swallowed, and his voice, though soft, came out clear enough for everyone to hear. I don't have much, he said. But this song kept me alive. And I want to share it. Something shifted in the air. The audience quieted. The judges leaned closer without meaning to. The lights above him warmed his hair and shoulders like a small sun, making him look almost fragile, but unbroken. Aidan lowered his head just slightly, closed his eyes, and placed his fingers on the strings. There was no turning back now. And just like that, the entire Coliseum fell into absolute silence. The first note of Hotel California rose slowly into the air, soft and trembling, like the beginning of a memory returning from far away. Aidan didn't rush. He let the sound linger, hovering like mist, settling over the thousands of silent faces watching him. His fingers moved with gentleness, not skill meant to impress, but care, like every chord held a piece of his heart he wasn't sure he was ready to show. When he finally began to sing, his voice was not smooth or polished. It was raw, fragile, and painfully honest. On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, the words didn't sound like lyrics. They sounded like a story being lived in real time. His Irish accent wrapped around the melody in a way that made the song feel new, unfamiliar, aching. He wasn't performing. He was remembering. The crowd felt it immediately. Conversation stopped. Hands lowered. Even the restless children stilled. Aidan's eyes did not open. He wasn't seeing the Coliseum, the lights, or the judges. He was seeing a tiny cottage near the Atlantic coast, where the wind always smelled like salt. He was seeing his mother humming while stirring soup over the fire, his father showing him how to hold the same guitar he held now. His fingers shook slightly when he reached the line. There were voices down the corridor. His breath hitched, just barely, but enough for the audience closest to the stage to hear. Judge Nina pressed her hand to her lips. Judge Ramon, who rarely reacted to anything, blinked hard, his jaw tightening. Judge Liza leaned forward, elbows on the table, her eyebrows pinched together as if trying to steady herself. Aiden continued, his voice cracking as emotion pushed through each note. It wasn't practiced control. It was pain he had carried alone for too long. The tremor in his voice became the very thing that made it beautiful. The audience began to feel something pressing behind their ribs, quiet, heavy, and familiar. Grief. Loneliness. The longing for someone who is gone but still felt. When he reached the final verse, his voice dropped even softer, barely above a whisper. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. The notes collapsed into silence after the final chord. No one clapped. No one moved. It was not the kind of moment applause could follow. It was the kind that stole breath away and demanded stillness. Aiden slowly opened his eyes, confused by the quiet, wondering if he had failed. But what he saw instead were faces, hundreds of faces, filled with tears, trembling lips, and hearts cracked open. Judge Nina wiped her cheeks openly. Judge Ramon took a deep breath and failed to steady himself. Judge Liza's eyes glistened, full of something gentle and aching. The boy who had walked on stage invisible was now seen, completely, painfully, beautifully seen. The silence finally broke, not with applause, but with the soft sound of someone trying not to sob. Judge Nina was the first to react. She stood from her seat, tears spilling down her cheeks in full view of the cameras, uncaring of how she looked. Her voice trembled as she tried to speak, but at first no words came out. She placed her hand over her heart, as if steadying something that had been shaken loose. Finally, with a voice still fragile, she managed, Aiden, that wasn't just singing. That was your soul talking. The auditorium remained hushed. No one dared to interrupt the moment. Aiden stepped back a little, holding his guitar close to his chest, his eyes wide and uncertain. He didn't know if her words meant approval or pity. All he knew was that something inside him was trembling. Judge Ramon, who was known for being the toughest critic, took off his glasses, not to clean them, but to hide the way his eyes glistened. His voice was thick when he spoke. I have judged thousands of performers, he said slowly, but only a few have ever sung because they needed to, because their life depended on it. You didn't perform for us, Aiden. You survived in front of us. His words struck something in the room. A few people in the audience began to cry openly. Others clasped their hands together, feeling the ache in their chests. Judge Liza stood next, unable to remain seated. She walked toward the stage, her footsteps echoing softly across the silent Colosseum. Aiden's eyes followed her, confused, unsure if he was in trouble or being comforted. When she reached him, she didn't speak immediately. She simply placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, steady and warm. Then she said, softly so it felt like she was speaking only to him, you came here alone. Carrying memories too heavy for someone your age. But look, she turned, gesturing to the thousands of people watching. You are not alone anymore. Aiden's breath caught. His grip on the guitar tightened as his eyes filled, blurring the world around him. The host stepped forward, clearing his throat though his voice cracked too. Ladies and gentlemen, he tried to say, but even he had to pause to wipe his face. The judges have reached their decision. But there was no suspense. Everyone already knew. The moment felt destined. Judge Ramon raised Aidan's hand into the air. The title, he announced, goes to Aidan O'Reilly. The room erupted, not in polite applause, but in roaring, unstoppable, overwhelming cheers. People rose to their feet, clapping, crying, shouting his name. Aidan's knees nearly gave out. He covered his face with both hands as tears finally fell, deep, shaking sobs that had waited years to be released. The judges didn't stay behind their table. They went to him. They hugged him. Held him. Cried with him. In that moment, he was no longer the poor boy from Herd. Someone understood. Someone Low Ireland. He was summoned. For the first time since he had lost everything, Aidan felt home.